This episode of Lex Out Loud is brought to you by my patrons, readers, and listeners. If you'd like to learn how to support this podcast, visit lexstarwalker.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 51 of Lex Out Loud, Writing Science Fiction. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. This show is a chronicle of my journey as a science fiction novelist. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm so glad that you could join me today. Really excited to get behind the mic today and talk a little bit about writing and what I've been up to and what I'm working on, all that fun stuff. Thanks so much for tuning in. So real quick, at the beginning of the show, I just want to say, I talked a bit about this last episode 50, but I am resurrecting my podcast, Game Master's Journey. So a lot of you, most of you, maybe all of you listening to this right now, used to listen to that show back when I produced it. And I still get emails and messages from people who are discovering the show even now and really enjoying it. And I've been back into doing a little gaming myself in recent months. So I thought I would return to Game Master's Journey. Maybe there's a little bit more that I can say about game mastering. So for those of you that are previous fans of the show, I am not at this point promising to release weekly episodes forever. I'm basically going to release episodes as I have topics to talk about. So I've pretty much at this point got the first episode written. I've got ideas for a few more episodes beyond that. But after that, I'm not sure. So if you enjoy Game Master's Journey and you'd like to see more new episodes and you have any ideas of something I could talk about on the show or a question I could answer, let me know. I'm collecting ideas for future episodes. So you can reach me by email at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com or let me know in our Discord server. So right now, kind of what I'm thinking as far as the two podcasts, Lex Out Loud and Game Master's Journey, is I will do my best to put out an episode of one of those shows every week as much as I can. I'm starting to dry up a little bit on things to talk about on this show, Lex Out Loud, that I haven't already talked about or that wouldn't be too spoilery for the books that I'm writing. So I was thinking about the fact that I probably am not going to be able to produce episodes of this show every week going forward, at least for the next little while. And that was part of the reason to bring back Game Master's Journey, is so that I have something I can release, hopefully on the weeks that I don't have new Lex Out Loud content for you. So the hope is right now is to release one of the shows every week or as close to that as I can manage. So if on a given week there isn't a new Lex Out Loud episode, check out Game Master's Journey. There might be a new episode of that. And I do think that there's a lot of crossover between the two shows, even more than I ever realized. And this is something I think I've talked a little bit about on this show. And I know I've talked a bit about it on my blog in my recent series of blog articles about how my writing process has evolved. But, I've always felt that game mastering was kind of in some ways practicing for writing and that it used a lot of the same mental muscles, so to speak. But it was only recently when I wrote my last novel and I tried doing a little more kind of discovery type writing that I really realized how similar the two things, game mastering and writing, really are, especially if you approach game mastering kind of like I do, and especially if you're more of a discovery writer. In a lot of ways, they're pretty much almost exactly the same. So there is a lot of crossover between the two shows, and I think going forward that will be even more so the case. One of the common bits of feedback I get for Game Master's Journey is people really like it most when it's more general and not specific to a certain game. For instance, a lot of the more recent episodes of the show were very geared towards Dungeons and Dragons. So that's the way I'm planning to go forward with Game Master's Journey, is to make it more general Game Master topics and content, and not focused on a specific game so much. And yeah, I think more and more the two shows are going to complement one another and cover a lot of the similar topics. So I think I may actually do some crossover episodes. In fact, right now I'm planning to do one in which I will produce an episode for both podcasts at once. So the same episode will appear in two different podcasts. I'm going to try it, experiment with it. I don't know how things like the iTunes database, if that'll cause any problems with that. I don't know. I don't know how much of a hassle it's going to be to produce the same episode on two different shows, but I'm going to try it just to see how it goes, and may fail spectacularly, but that's something I'm going to try in the future. But even barring that, I think there will be a lot of overlap between the shows, which is not to say, other than the crossover episodes, not to say that I'm going to be saying the exact same thing on both shows, but I may explore some of the same topics coming at them from different angles on the two shows, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So, please don't look at it like this other show, Game Master's Journey, is taking away from Lex Out Loud. It could definitely seem that way to you. I get that, but that's really not the case. Those weeks that there aren't Lex Out Loud episodes, there wouldn't have been, regardless of whether I was doing Game Master's Journey or not. Because there's just only so many things I can talk about right now, or that I want to talk about right now, as opposed to my books and writing and things like that. So until I'm doing more on maybe the agent front, or working with alpha and beta readers, I don't know that there's a whole lot more new to say as far as Lex Out Loud. So yeah, I'll just be doing Game Master's Journey on down weeks. So it's not a thing of one show cannibalizing another. It's just instead of getting nothing for certain weeks, hopefully you'll get this other show instead. So today I'm really happy to report that I have finished the second draft of my novel. Super excited about that. Gosh, I haven't really been keeping track. I feel like it's took me like 3 weeks. Is that right? Not very long. It took me, I think, a week and a half, 2 weeks to read through it and write down all the edits and note all the things I wanted to change. And then it took about another week to get all of that plugged into the Word file, into the digital form of the document, and get all that updated. And yeah, it's done. I finished it Friday. Took a fraction of the time I thought it would take. This is only my second novel. It's only the second novel I've edited. And it's just so different from the last one I wrote, just the novel itself and how I approached it. And also the last one was so long ago that I really had no idea how long the editing process would take. But I thought it would be a thing of months as opposed to a few weeks. So I'm really happy that I got it done so fast. It was kind of funny. Like I was pretty, going pretty steady on doing the actual editing, which, what I do is I print out a hard copy, and then I sit down with that with my pen and with a pad of paper, and then I read it, and then I just note any corrections that I see that I need to make. I've got the pad of paper if I need to take any notes on anything. But that way I can, sit somewhere comfortable with it and read it more like you'd read a book, and not have to stare at a screen, and do all the edits analog style. And then once all that was done, then I took all that to my computer and I made all of the changes. So that's just how I approach it. And once I got the actual editing done and it was just a thing of putting the changes in the computer, I just got very impatient and just wanted it to be done. So I've been working on it every day, 7 days a week since I started, and just putting a lot of hours in just to get it done because I just wanted to be done with it. I wanted to have it finished so I could have some people take a look at it and finally get some feedback on this thing that I've created. So I don't think this is going to be a super long episode today. I really don't necessarily have a ton to talk about today. I've actually been working on the Game Master's Journey episode I'm going to produce, which will be probably the next thing I produce, will be that episode. Got a lot of I want to say in that, but before I did that, I wanted to do another episode of Lex Out Loud to let you know that I did finish the second draft and going on to the next step in this journey. And I thought I would take this opportunity to talk a little bit about how I'm doing the editing and how I'm approaching it. I was originally thinking to do like a whole full episode on kind of my editing strategy because I did some research and I sat down and I decided how many drafts I thought I wanted to do and what I wanted to focus on with each draft, because you don't want to necessarily try to edit everything all at once. At least the way I approach it is each revision, I have specific things I'm focusing on during that revision, because there's just way too many things that need to be done to do it all in one editing pass. I mean, you're just going to miss a ton of stuff if you approach it that way. So I found, and I think I've heard many other people talk about this too, that it's better to, focus on a few things, do a revision, then, focus on a few more things, do a different revision, another revision, and so on. So I'd come up with this document where I had all my revisions and what I plan to do with each one. But, I've done the first draft. I just finished the second draft, and already I'm making changes to the future revisions. So this is a work in progress as far as my editing strategy. So yeah, I decided instead of doing a whole episode on it, I'll just talk about what I've kind of done so far and what I'm thinking comes next, because this all may change. Already some of it has changed. So I don't want to, spend a bunch of time telling you about something that isn't even going to be the way I end up doing it. So I started out and wrote the first draft. And, different people approach things in different ways, and whatever works for you, you do that. But as far as for me, I have some rules that I follow when I'm writing the first draft, and these are really important for me. And if you're someone new to this, I highly suggest you follow the same rules. Or if you're someone who is struggling to finish a novel and you haven't managed it, I highly encourage you to follow these rules. I think you'll find them quite helpful. So the first rule, and really the main rule, the most important thing, and everything else is kind of an outgrowth of this, is when I'm writing the first draft, I just write the first draft. And I am not allowed to stop until it's finished. I am not allowed to edit until it's finished. I even try to avoid going back and reading what I already wrote until it's finished. This last book I wrote, the first few chapters I did, in the beginning, I would go back and read the chapter I just wrote before I started writing that day. And I was using that, I think, as just a way to get motivated to write and to get going. But once I got, 5 or 6 chapters or so in, I kind of had my momentum going by then, and I stopped doing that. So, I'd read the first maybe 5 or 6 or so chapters a few times, but after that, I didn't really read what I wrote. So when I sat down to do my first edit, to do version 2, my first revision, the first few chapters I'd read, but the rest of it I actually never read, other than, as I was writing it. So yeah, the important thing is that almost like you have different people living inside of you, inside your head. You have the writer and you have the editor. Of course, it's not really like this, but it's kind of a handy way to think about it. When you're doing the first draft, the editor gets like they're off. They're on vacation. They're not allowed to come into work. They're not allowed to show their face. They go off and do whatever the parts of your brain you're not using do. And you're just focused on writing. There are a lot of reasons for this. The biggest really, and kind of what it all boils down to is so you can finish. Novels are really long, even if you're not writing genre fiction, even if you're quote lucky enough to write in one of those genres where you can write what seem to us very short novels. But even those, it's still a long thing to write. And unless you commit to finishing it, and unless you focus on finishing it and don't allow anything else to distract you until you finish it, the odds are not in your favor that you will actually ever finish it. And there are so many people who've begun and yet not finished a novel, far more people than there are who finished a novel. And that's part of the reason why it's just such a long undertaking that you really have to commit to the end to have any chance of getting there. The other thing is you can just endlessly revise things. You know, it's a stereotype at this point, but you know, the writer that just keeps rewriting chapter 1 over and over again and never moves on. You know, honestly, my kind of philosophy as far as that goes is it's completely pointless to edit chapter 1 or any other chapter of your book until you've finished writing the final chapter, until you've written the entire book. Because even if you are an outliner or a planner and you're not a discovery writer at all, chances are good that by the time you finish that novel, things will have changed. And so to spend time editing the first chapter before you've finished the book may end up being a complete waste of time, because you may end up changing that chapter entirely. You may end up cutting it out. Who knows? So really, it's pretty silly and completely a waste of time and not at all efficient to be editing early parts or any part of your book until you've finished it. Because until you've finished and written the end on the final page, you don't know what that book is going to be. You don't know where it's going to take you. You don't know how it's going to end up. And it may end up very similar to what you thought it would when you started, or it may end up very differently. You may end up invoking themes within the book that you had no plan or intention of doing or didn't realize were going to be there. You may end up adding characters or taking characters out, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many things that can change, that if you're looking at things from an efficiency point of view, like avoiding wasting time, then it's really smart to wait until you finish it before you do any kind of editing, because any editing that you do before you finish it may end up being a complete waste of time, because you end up doing something totally different with that part of the book anyway. And part of it, I think, also is a thing of momentum. You know, you get into the habit of writing every day and, you know, putting out a new chapter or two every day or whatever you do, and you get into that rhythm and you get that momentum going. But if you're occasionally stopping to edit what you've already done, then now you're losing momentum. You're breaking that rhythm. You know, you're doing something else now, and then you got to get back into the speed of things again, or at least that's been my experience. So as I said, when I'm writing the first draft, I just start and I go and I keep going forward until I get to the end. If anything happens during this process where I change something, where I might be tempted to go back and edit previous chapters because now I changed my mind about something I'm doing, I don't go back and edit. Instead, I will make a note somewhere when I do my first revision that I want to change these things. So I actually have an example of this that happened when I was writing this book. I started writing the first draft. And when I started writing the first draft, I was thinking that the city that my story takes place in, this huge space station, was going to have a population of around 5 million people. It was going to be just this huge city. And I worked out, the size of the cylinder and all the dimensions and all that stuff and how fast it needed to spin for 1G gravity. And I'd done all that stuff. And as I started writing the first draft, at some point in the early part of the book, probably the first 8 or so chapters, I changed my mind on that and I decided to make it a little smaller and instead have it have a population of 750,000 people instead of 5 million. So about the population of Seattle, Washington, which is a town I'm pretty familiar with. So I don't know. I was in like chapter 8 or something when I made that decision and I decided to change the size of the city. Now, I had already written stuff referencing the size of the city and saying it was 5 million people and all this stuff. And I could have just stopped what I was doing there and gone back and fixed all that, which probably would have taken days and I would have lost a lot of momentum. But I didn't do that. Instead, I just kept going. And instead, I actually use Microsoft OneNote to keep track of everything for my book. And so I had a page in that notebook that is just things I want to change in the next draft. And some of the things are specific to certain chapters, like, oh, in this chapter, I want to add a scene about this or whatever. And some of it is just general things about the book. And so I just added to that document that, hey, I changed the size of the city from 5 million to 750,000. And, I did this in chapter 8. So in chapter 1 through 7, I need to look for any references to the city being bigger and fix those. And then I forgot about it because I'd written it down. And that's the beauty of writing things down. Then you can forget about them. And I then dealt with that when I did the edit for version 2. So yeah, I just start writing. I don't stop. If I change something along the way, like I decide to take a character out or add a new character or change the size of the city or anything like that, I just make a note of it. And I just keep writing from that point forward with the change made. And then I will worry about anything that needs to be adjusted in previous chapters during the editing process. And yeah, I could probably do a whole episode on why, you should just write the first draft and not edit during, writing the first draft. And there are people that do edit as they go and they are successful and they publish novels on a regular basis. I'm not going to say those people don't exist. They definitely do. And if that's you, then like I said, keep doing what works for you. But there are also a lot of people who have not finished a novel and have been working on a novel for longer than they probably should have been. And a lot of times when you ask those people, it turns out they're trying to edit as they go. And so oftentimes the first step in actually finishing the stupid thing is to stop editing as you go and just get the first draft down. For me, I often think of the first draft as throwing paint at a wall and just seeing what sticks and what you like and what you don't like. And then later, you go and make shapes out of that paint you threw on the wall. So, it's a lot easier to polish a statue that already exists than it is to carve the statue to begin with. So that's another great reason to just finish the first draft and not worry about editing. Get something down on the page, get a story down. And then once you have that, a story with a beginning, middle, and end, then you can make it better. But until you get it down in its original form, there's nothing to make better. And also, part of it is the kind of your mental attitude and the idea that a first draft is allowed to suck and a first draft will suck and a first draft is supposed to suck. So every time you're going in and editing your first draft, you're going against that. And you're basically telling yourself that, oh, my first draft has to be perfect, which is only going to hold you back, is only going to slow you down. There's something to be said about the freedom of your mind to just accept, hey, my first draft is allowed to suck. It definitely will suck. Everybody's first draft sucks. And I'm just going to write the thing and get it done. You can be a lot more open with your ideas and less judgmental of every idea you have. Save all that for the editing process. That's when all that kind of stuff will serve you well. But until you get that first draft done, that kind of stuff's anathema. It's only going to get in your way. So once the first draft is done, then I take some time off. And, I've heard people say a minimum of 6 weeks. I think that's what Stephen King says. And that's what I decided to do for this book. And that's pretty much exactly the amount of time I took off was 6 weeks because I couldn't stand it anymore at that point. During which time I don't look at the book. I try not to think about it so that when I do sit down to do that first revision, I can come at it fresh. It's not so much in my mind. So hopefully I will see more things that I might not have noticed otherwise. So this is when I print out the hard copy and I do my first read through to do this version 2.0, the first edit. So during this edit, I'm more focused on just reading and hopefully enjoying the story. I'm not so much getting nitpicky with, comma errors or spelling errors or passive versus active voice or too many adverbs or adjectives or anything like that. I mean, if I notice something like that, then yes, I fix it, but that's not what I'm looking for. It's not what I'm focusing on. I'm just reading the book and asking myself, does this make sense? Are things described that need to be described without being over described? Things like that. So I just look to fix big problems as far as the characters or the plot or the setting, add descriptions that are missing, things like that. And my focus is on big picture stuff, story structure, story continuity, narrative arcs. If I set up an arc for a character, do I finish it? If I set up a narrative arc for a plot, do I finish it? Characterization, do the characters each have their own identity, and is that consistent through the book? Character arcs, I guess I already mentioned. Any plot holes, do I notice any pacing issues, like certain parts seem too slow or boring or anything like that? And yeah, I will literally sit and make corrections, on the printout that I have, or if it's too much to go on there, I have a notebook with me and I will note, on this page, add this paragraph or whatever. I take paragraphs out, I add new stuff, whatever I need to do. Another thing I'm on the lookout is for any redundancies. I had a lot of this in my first draft because of the way I started it. So am I telling you the same things about the city over and over again? Am I telling you the same things about the main character over and over again? And, make sure that I'm not doing that too much. I think I already mentioned, but I make note of descriptions that need to be added or expanded or rewritten. And yeah, if I see something like a misspelled word or a punctuation error or something like that, I will mark it and fix it. But I'm not really so much looking for those right now. Because again, I'm going to be changing so much stuff. It's a little early in the game to be worried about commas because I might completely rewrite a section or take a section out. So that's going to be one of the last things I do is worry about like nitpicky little things. I want to get it in as close to the final version as I can before I worry too much about that kind of stuff. And then, as I said, once I've finished this read through, then I go and put it into the actual Word document and make the changes. So that's my second draft, my version 2.0. So I was originally planning to do a third draft and then send the third draft out to my alpha readers. But after doing the second draft, I ended up doing a lot of the stuff I was planning to do in the third draft. Well, I guess it's not a lot of stuff, but the things I'm talking about is I thought in the third draft I would resolve spelling errors, punctuation errors, any issues with grammar, capitalization, make sure I have all my serial commas, stuff like that. But it turned out as I was doing the first revision, I'm just like such a stickler for stuff. And I just like, I can't not notice a misspelled word or a missing comma or something like that I just kind of did that while I was doing everything else because I just couldn't help it. So that's already done. And then a lot of the other stuff I wanted to do in my third draft, which is more focusing on the prose and improving the prose, things like, getting rid of adverbs and adjectives, getting rid of to be verbs, getting rid of passive voice, getting rid of cliched phrases, getting rid of words or phrases that I use way too much, making the descriptions more powerful and concise, all that kind of stuff I was going to do in the third draft. But as I finished the second draft, I thought, this is plenty clean enough to send to my alpha readers. And, all those things I just talked about that I was going to do for the third draft are the kind of things that I'd rather do after I get feedback from the alpha readers, because that's more getting into like nitpicky stuff. And like, for instance, I don't want to spend a bunch of time rewriting a certain paragraph or a certain chapter and, strengthening my verbs and my nouns and getting rid of adverbs and passive voice and all that stuff, and then turn around and cut that paragraph or chapter out of the book entirely. Because as soon as I do that, all that time I spent editing that chapter or paragraph was a complete waste of time, because it's not going to be in the book. My concern, and the reason why I was planning to do that third draft before I send it to the alphas, was I didn't want it to be such a rough draft that things are distracting the alphas from what I'm really interested in, which is the character and the characters in the story and things like that. But after reading it myself, it's not poetry by any means, because I haven't done those things, but it's plenty clean enough for an alpha to read and understand. And it's more than clean enough for that kind of thing. So I do feel like at this point, I want to get at least some feedback from some people before I start worrying about that kind of more, prose level stuff. Because, I may end up needing to do something very different based on what the alphas tell me, what's working, what's not working. So I'd rather fix that kind of stuff first before I worry about going to the sentence level edits and making each sentence the best that it can be. So that kind of stuff will still be what I do in the third draft, but I'm going to wait to do the third draft until I get feedback from at least some of my alphas. What I may do, it kind of depends how many alpha readers I end up getting. But if I have a good number of alpha readers, I may send the second draft out to a few and see what they have to say. And if they aren't suggesting anything major, then I could start on those kinds of edits. Or I may just send the second draft out to all the alphas, wait till I get feedback from all of them, and then do all that stuff, as well as incorporate any alpha feedback in the third draft. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And then other things I might address in the third draft would be really just drilling down to a scene by scene and even sentence by sentence level. Does each scene serve a purpose in the book? Ideally, a scene will advance character, setting, or plot. You want it to do at least two of those. Ideally, every scene does all three if you can. So I would look at every scene and make sure that it's doing that. I would eliminate any excessive world building that just the reader doesn't care about or is just too much. And again, see why I need alpha feedback for this, because I don't think I put too much world building in, but I need to hear what other people think. And yeah, at that point, I would think more about my chapter and my paragraph breaks. Do I have some paragraphs that are too long that I should break up? Do I have some chapters that are too long that I should break up? Things like that. But yeah, I think that'll all be the third draft, and I will wait to get feedback from the alphas before I do that. So yeah, once I had done that third draft and, as part of that incorporated whatever feedback I get from alphas, then at that point I would either do another revision if I feel like it's needed, or I would send it out to the beta readers, see what they have to say, and then do another revision after that. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. So yeah, the first draft was just getting the story down in its roughest form, no editing as I go, just get it out into the world, onto the paper, and then see what we've got. That was the first draft. Second draft is reading through it, making any corrections that I see that need to be made. Just looking for, does the story make sense? Do the characters make sense? Are they consistent? Do I pay off everything I set up? If I put a gun on the mantle in Act 1, does it go off in Act 3? That kind of stuff. And yeah, just fixing anything that I see that needs fixed, adding descriptions where I think there need to be more descriptions, things like that. And that's all the second draft. And at least with this book, once I got the second draft done, I think it's ready for outside opinions to have some people read it and tell me what they think. And then once I get that feedback, I will incorporate that feedback as needed, make the changes that are needed. And then at that point, really look at the pros. And, you could kind of say that the first and the second draft were all about, who and what and why. I'm getting down the who, the characters, the what, the plot, what happens, the why things happen, the setting and all that. And then the third draft is when I start thinking more about the how, which is how am I telling this story, and getting down to each scene and even each sentence, looking at each word. Is this the best word I can use? Can I get rid of this generic verb and this annoying adverb and use an awesome verb instead that does a better job than those two words did all by itself? Same thing with adjectives, passive voice, to be verbs, all that stuff that you want to get rid of as much as you can. So yeah, that'll be the third draft, and then, just go from there. So that's where I'm at in the process. That's what I'm thinking about. And yeah, just keep plugging away. And then of course, pretty soon I'm going to start the first draft of the next book. So right now I'm getting some stuff going so that I can get some alpha readers going. And once I get all that dealt with and I get this out to the alphas, then I start really focusing on book 2. So yeah, hopefully I'll have more to share about that too in the near future. So I think that'll wrap it up for me today. Short episode, but didn't want to ramble on too long. And yeah, keep an eye out for new Game Master's Journeys episodes coming soon. If you would like to reach me, you can email me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at LexStarWalker, and you can call my voicemail 951-465-5391. Also, you can join me in our community on Discord. You can find a link to that in the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. And real quick, just at the end of the show, I want to point out, in case maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't notice, but you ever notice how so many podcasts you listen to are just full of advertisements? And have you noticed how this show doesn't have any advertisements? How you don't have to skip through or fast forward through ads or just sit there and listen to the same boring ads that you've heard more times than you can count? Yeah, I don't have advertisements. So instead of advertisements, what I do have is I have a Patreon where you can support me. And I also have a support page on my website, lexstarwalker.com/support, where I have listed various ways that you can help me out, help keep this show going. Things like buying my D&D supplements on my store, using my Amazon referral link when you shop on Amazon, becoming a patron, getting a free trial of Audible, courtesy of yours truly, things like that. So if you enjoy the show, and especially if you enjoy the fact that there aren't annoying ads or any ads of any kind on this show, then please support the show. Please support what I'm doing. Because yeah, I much like it without ads as well. I hate advertisements, especially when there's as much ads as there is content, which seems to be more and more of a thing lately. So yeah, if you're like me and you'd rather not have ads, then support the show and we can keep it that way. So yeah, that's all I got for today. Keep an eye out for Game Master's Journey and more episodes of Lex Out Loud. And until then, keep writing.